All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Memories of Ice spoiler discussion. I am joined by kind of a whole new set of guests here, except for Jordan, who obviously has been on these chats before for Gardens of the Moon and Dead House Gates, and has been one of my main co-hosts of this read-along so far. I am also joined by Pat, who I'm going to have introduce himself, and is the new member of one of our co-hosts for this read-along because we had some lineup shifts as Josh DNF during Memories of Ice. And Ian is here, but if he can make it to the chat, he will be late. He is running late in traffic. So we're just going to start. And if he doesn't come, that's a bummer. But Pat, how about you introduce yourself and then we'll move on to our special guest over there in the corner.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, my name is Pat. I started a channel a few months ago called Pat's Mythos. I've been a part of this read-along since it started in January, but just got the invitation to join here on the chats from Alex, and I'm really happy about it, although I'm sorry to see Josh DNF. Selfishly, I'm happy to be here. So, yeah, really looking forward to doing the rest of these, and yeah, I've been enjoying the read-along so far, and looking forward to it.
Nice. And we are joined by our special guest, Jimmy Nuts from the Fantasy Nuttwork. Jimmy, if you want to introduce yourself, I would be shocked if anyone in the chat didn't know who you were, but might as well.
All right. So what's up with this special guest? Like, I literally looked at the stream and it's like with special guests. Like,
you are the special guest,
Bob Barker.
You are.
we have one special guest every episode.
Yeah,
it's a special guest this time.
But why?
You're our special? Because you know all of the answers about Memories of Ice, right? Wait,
that's you remember every detail. You're gonna help us with this.
Yikes! I didn't know my name was that close to Philip Chase. That is troubling. I mean, Memories of Ice is no middle of the mall shit. This is not for the weak of heart. There are no weepers on the slog. Okay.
Yes.
So many of you will not make it. Okay, to book 10. Many of you will not see the end. But for those who will, Memories of Ice is the launching point. Because basically it's 1,000 miles an hour at this point until you reach the end. And if you think Memories of Ice was epic, and it is, just wait. It gets more ridiculous. The air of the concourse blackened as 1,500 bows whispered as one. What a banger line. My God. This book's amazing. I don't remember all of it because it's been 2 years, but we're going to have a good time. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Yeah. Excited to have you. Jordan, if you want to go ahead and, introduce yourself, you could even share some of your thoughts on Memories of Ice generally. And
yeah, sure.
Kind of go from there. Start the conversation.
Jordan from Jordan Reads. I've been on all these other episodes, but if you don't know my channel, check it out. But Memories of Ice, I really liked. A little context for how I read it. My May was absolutely nuts because I was traveling and Zelda came out.
Jimmy Nuts.
So my May was Jimmy Nuts. And Zelda came out, I was distracted, and I was traveling, whatever. So it took me 5 weeks to read it, and I normally read books much faster than that. And a lot of times I struggle when I'm reading a book for too long. So I think the middle of Memories of Ice suffered for me just because of that. But otherwise, I thought it was so good. And the ending was wild. I read the last 4 or 5 hours in one sitting. So
crazy.
Yeah, this was insane book. I think
oh, sorry, I was reading a comment.
I don't know what to say. I liked Gardens of the Moon a lot. Liked Dead House Gates more than Gardens of the Moon, and then Memories of Ice felt like the first true Malazan book. It just felt like, from the beginning, the scope was as bigger than we've ever seen it. There was more characters than we've ever seen. It was taking stuff from previous books and kind of combining it into this book. And then we had just a whole new introduction to things that I know were going to be in the series, such like the crippled god, more information on warrens and big elder gods, and just a lot more power and information about the big forces at play in this world than what we got in the previous 2 books. And just felt like, okay, here we go. There's way more here to this world. This is just as epic. And yeah, I mean, at times there's a lot going on. And there are multiple times during this book where you'll be reading a page and just like, I can't even picture this, because it feels like take the most epic action scene you've ever seen on a movie and multiply it by 5. And that's like the scope of how many people he was describing on a single page. So there was a lot of that. And then there was also a lot of these very, very concentrated personal, intimate character moments, I think, with a lot of the main characters in this book, which I also love. So it kind of felt like the best of both worlds as it relates to what I've enjoyed about this series so far. And I think there's no real better place to kick it off with than talking about, just getting into this book and the prologue. And I'm going to start with Pat. Pat, what did you think about the prologue to Memories of Ice?
So I didn't know what I was getting into at all. I remember I was really eager to start, and I actually pulled up, I was reading it on Kindle, so I pulled up my browser at work when I was low on work to do and had some free time. And so I'm sitting there in my office reading the prologue, and I'm like,
that's when I read manga.
I was like, wow, I didn't really know what I was reading. Of course, I did go back and read the whole thing about halfway or 3/4 of the way through, and it made a lot more sense. I remember with the Jaghoots and I forget her, but Tool's sister coming and I guess offering to take the last Jaghoot child, and it's at the Rent, I think it's called. That part stood out to me more than the second part, technically, with Calor. Although the Calor stuff paid off really good later. I really liked that initial Jaghoot stuff, and that payoff at the end was actually my favorite part of the ending, more so than the Yakovian stuff, which might shock some people. So yeah, great prologue all around.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I'll let everyone else go. Jordan, what do you think about the prologue?
I really enjoyed how, right from the get-go, we expanded the world so much. That this world has a deep history, but because of the expanse of time that passed, it just feels like it really broadened the scope of everything for me, which I really liked, because I'm big on lore, and another big selling point on this book for me is how much lore we got after having next to none in the first two books. So I really liked the prologue for that context of the rest of the book.
Nice. And Jimmy, I know it's been 2 years since you read it, but I know you did read the prologue and maybe a portion of chapter 1 or even further.
I read the first
recently?
3 or 4 chapters because I was hoping to reread it with y'all, but it just didn't really work out that way. So
it's a short book. So
I don't get why.
Just a tiny thing, but man, I was just going to read the prologue, and then I just kept reading because it was so good, and I was like, okay, I need to read the other stuff I talked about, on my channel. I need to do this, but this prologue's awesome. It's probably somewhere between my second to fourth favorite, and one of the reasons why I like Memories of Ice, but also this prologue, is the fact that history is very real in the Malazan world, and Erickson is showing you characters that are thousands of years old. He's showing you warrens that at one point maybe were flourishing, and now they have just completely disintegrated, and then you're seeing an empire that is maybe faltering possibly, and all of this stuff. That's a lot of context to keep in your mind.
Yeah.
Memories of Ice is the first time he opens up the Pandora's box, I think, where you really get a sense of the time that has passed. It's not just Mappo and Ikariam walking around the desert being like, shit's old. Okay, we know. but Memories of Ice becomes a tangible history. And the prologue sets out where you think it's going to go. And you get answers in chapter 1 about the prologue, which is really cool because we end up talking about Dragnapur, if I remember correctly, right in chapter 1 or 2. And that is a question that you can actually formulate from the prologue. And you think, well, that's great. But then we find out that a lot of other things from that prologue are going to find their ways into the story. So we kind of have an immediate payoff, some stuff that works out into the middle of the book. And then, of course, at the end of the book, we kind of get to tie it all together. And that is why it's so appropriately named Memories of Ice. So I just think that this is the real, it's not the first Malazan book, but it's kind of the first Malazan book. And to me, and some people, this is their favorite because it's the easiest, maybe not the easiest to follow, but it's the most like other epic fantasy in terms of the way that it's presented. I was telling Alex before everyone joined that this one's a little bit easier for me to remember because Erickson Strip tells you some things. For the first time in the series, he in plain language is like this, and you're like, thank you. And then of course you get all the Ikariam stuff, and you're like, I don't know what's going on. What is happening right now? So the first third of the book, I think, kind of sets you off on a good path and gives you some footing. And I think it's really rewarding personally. And also just one of the best battle scenes I've ever seen. The Siege of Capistan is,
oh my gosh.
legendary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
So
just going to
good.
add on to that, Jimmy, and just say, like, when we get those little notes at the start, say 300,000 years ago, and we get that whole story, and then it's like 100,000 years later, or maybe 200,000 years later, but still 100,000 years before the events we know. I don't know of a lot of fantasy stories that look at that type of scale in years. Like, a lot of times it'll be like 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago, and it's meant to feel like a long time in that world in another series. But here, Erickson is telling you something happened 300,000 years ago when there's clearly events happening there that something else happened hundreds of thousands of years ago that they're just recovering from or talking about. And that's just type of scale that it's hard to relate to on a human scale because, humans here on Earth have only really been developed for like 10,000 years, if that. So to imagine these races and all this stuff going down for 300,000 years is kind of hard to imagine, but still makes it pay off all the more awesome to know how much went into it and how long things had been. Kind of
it also plays with like cycles of who's at the top of the food chain, right? Because and also it kind of messes with the narrative that we had about Jaghuts in the prior books, does it not? The Tialana Mass and the Jaghut story kind of gets flipped on its head here. So now you're starting to question the narrative that you've been fed all along about the world and the lore of the little sprinkles that you get in the first two books. So it does a lot of stuff that who knows what was walking around on Earth 100,000 years ago. Maybe there were raptors with swords for arms. Maybe that was a thing. Probably not, but
can only hope.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
You weren't there, bro.
Jurassic Park 9. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think one of the first things I noticed was just the timeline of when this prologue is set. It's just way longer, and the fact that it's in the same book, despite being a prologue, and it's not like, oh, here's a additional history book of something that took place in this world all this time before. It's like, no, here's just a prologue. Then we're going to skip 300,000 years to just start the story, because this isn't like, oh, this is the only event that happened in the past, and then we just time skipped. It's just like a certain moment in the past, everything kept going on. There was all these repercussions because of that, and then we're just now seeing a new moment of history happening right now. And I think someone said it in the chat of like, this is definitely a read it twice type of prologue. And I would definitely agree. I mean, I would say probably read it like 6 times if you want. I think you could totally get like a ton out of here. And I'll be the first to admit, I think on the first time I read it, I definitely recognized like, oh, the scope is huge. This is epic. There is just a lot that is thrown at you right away. But it wasn't until probably I reread the prologue after I finished the book where I was like, oh, and stuff started to click together, like whether it was Night Chill and the one goddess who I'm forgetting the name, but is Night Chill, and Calor, and all of the history there, and then just skipping the the time before where we start seeing like the 2 kids that are trapped in the rent for all those years. So I think it is one hell of a way to kick off this book. And coming off of Dead House Gates, it was just like, okay, here we go. We're back in this full speed ahead type mode for Malazan. And it was a little bit different than what we've got in the first 2 books. I think the prologue for Dead House Gates there was a lot there, but I think this one was just, action wise, there was a lot going on, but you could also just tell the impact was a little bit more than we're used to.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think as a direct repercussion of that, we start getting the story. We start diving introduced to a whole bunch of new characters. We get Gruntle and the whole gang that is with Gruntle. And we get the usual characters that we saw in the first book, like again, is the Darujistan clan, Whiskey Jack and the Bridge Burners and all of them. You get Animator Rake, and we just get probably the biggest cast of characters we've seen yet. And I just want to know, was there any character out of the new one, so like Gruntle and them, like how did you guys feel about them for the first half of the book? Like, did you like Gruntle as a character? Did you like that storyline, or is it one that you kind of grew to appreciate during the Capistan siege and stuff after that?
I did not like Gruntle for a while. I just thought, I was just like, I don't know. I think because one, it's hard to like really feel invested in a new character when there's already these other characters that we missed. But also I just felt like that plot line was not as interesting as some of the other ones. But then like the last quarter of the book is when it started to, like when you really found out what was going on, that's when it all started to grow on me. But yeah, Gruntle, I didn't care for a bit, and all of his companions.
I kind of like Gruntle. I kind of like, obviously Malazan puts you with kind of like the lowly folk a lot of the time, as it's introducing a story, and something about like a caravan guard just kind of casually getting caught up in these events was kind of fun to watch. And he has this kind of like been doing this a long time, too good for it attitude, or maybe not too good for it, but he has this like seasoned attitude of like, I'm just trying to get paid. And he slowly gets caught up in some real insanity. And it just spirals by the time he is is it the Mortal Sword of Treach? I mean, from point A to point B. I just thought it was a really fascinating journey, but I could see how he might not be the easiest character to just get attached to immediately. I just happen to like his chapters and the involvement with it's like Karuli or the guy that he's guiding up until they get to Kapistan. I like those chapters.
Yeah. I think he kind of just read like a placeholder in some ways for me. Like he fit a certain type of character, which was fine, but it wasn't anyone that I wasn't like excited to read his chapter. I really wanted to get back to like what the heck is going on with everything else in the Whiskey Jack area.
Silver Fox is zapping her mother's life.
Yes, exactly.
Paladin Brood on page first time. Rake's back. It's like, it's very hard
with swords for arms.
I mean, it's really hard for Gruntle to compete.
Most importantly, Rake is back.
Yeah,
I love him.
I think that I'm with you, Jordan. I didn't like Gruntle at all in the first half of this book. In fact, when I thought he died, I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
I literally was like, oh, that makes sense. And then he's alive, and I was like, oh. Cool. But Stony, is it Stony or Stony?
Stony, I'm not sure.
I always said Stony.
All right, so we're saying Stony.
Okay, Stony.
I just said it in my head. I don't know what it actually is.
Stunny. Going with
Stunny.
So Stony, whenever Gruntle shows compassion for her and comforts her, is whenever I started liking Gruntle. And I realized that with all this craziness going on, like, you know, you have Krupp being an absolute Chad in this book. You have Kapistan, all this other stuff. But it just feels like Gruntle is supposed to be a little bit more of the down-to-earth, boots on the ground, Black Company viewpoint. And I see that now, especially looking back on the series, and also now having read some of Black Company and knowing how important it was for Erickson whenever he wrote the series, is that people like Croker and Black Company are our boots on the ground, while we're also seeing like the lady flying around a magic cart. Black Company's insane. But this is kind of, I think, the purpose of Gruntle in the story, if I could guess. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like part 3, when Gruntle really turns into like, okay, this character's changing completely. He felt like a totally different character. Like, I don't think it just absolutely felt like someone else than who I was reading. And there were parts where I was like, did I read about this character like in the first half of this book? And then I went back, I was like, oh yeah, he's like right there in the first chapter. He just wasn't anyone I thought really deeply about. But yeah, I think he was just not the focus of my attention during the first half of the book. But the second half, I ended up enjoying his storyline quite a bit. And I think the same goes for even like a number of different perspectives that we get in this book, whether it's like the Gray Swords and Ikovian. Like, I never disliked them, but I think it took me a little bit to really understand them. And then as everything started progressing, that's when I was like, okay, this is awesome.
I know that like Josh really didn't like the Gray Swords, and which is I think one of the reasons he ended up DNFing. I was on board with Ikovian from like day one. I thought he was great.
Ikovian's, yeah. I mean, yeah.
He's very confusing, but I love him.
Gray Swords. Oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay, you're good.
I was just going to say the Gray Swords I did like from the get-go. My only issue, and I had this with a couple different groups of people, I first could not differentiate the 3 roles Ikovian had, and then the 2 other guys that were like each some role high up in the Gray Swords.
Yeah.
I had
no idea for a bit.
One of them was like the tactician, one was like the overall leader, and one was like, I think, a healer or some type
of hard to keep them straight.
Yeah.
I could not get them straight. And the same happened for some of the bridge burners that had similar names that got a lot of page time. They all had names that I just could not. Obviously,
The
eventually,
right-hand man and the left
goes forward as like the character, so you don't need the other two to remember. But at first, I was liking it, but also kind of confused at the same time about who was who.
Just wait.
Yeah, I agree.
Just wait. You'll get them figured out, and then it'll all change again, and you're gonna be like,
Why did I feel so confident?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Steven says Gruntle completely changes once circumstances become more dire. He becomes a mythic figure once he uses a child shirt as a flag. Great arc. Yeah, I believe. I think that definitely. And I think Ikovian kind of the same way. I think there are many characters that start off like normal characters, and by the end of the book, they're just bigger than they're almost legends in their own way. Like not in the same way as the Animator Rake, but their impact on the people around them is one that will have huge repercussions on these people.
Yeah, it's story. Oh God, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go for it.
I was going to say, taking the common man and making him a myth is something in literature that's been done time and time again. A lot of people point to Ulysses by James Joyce as doing this. Suttree by Cormac McCarthy is another example of this as well. And Gruntle very much is that here too, I think.
Yeah, good point. Moving into, I guess we could talk about the Whiskey Jack and Perrin and the Silver Fox character and that whole storyline. What I just want to know, what are your guys' opinion of Silver Fox? Because I feel like this is a pretty heated discussion. I think some people really dislike her, same way, maybe not for the same reasons, definitely not for the same reason as people dislike Felison, but I feel like there's a pretty even break between who likes Silver Fox and why versus those who don't. So what do you guys?
I love Silver Fox. Like those scenes. I mean, not like as a person, but as a character. But like all of the chapters with her in them were some of my favorite. Because one, just like the concept of who she is just buck wild. But also, like the whole relationship with her and her mother was so cool, and obviously very dark and sad, but so cool. And I thought that like she was one of the most interesting characters for me. She was like probably top 3 characters of the book for me, just because all of the scenes she's in and like the role she ends up playing towards the end is just, and then like her failures and stuff are just, they are so good. Her character arc it felt so satisfying to me.
Yeah. Did you feel bad for, like, from the Maibi or the Mai power?
Oh, yeah.
From her point of view, did you feel like, were you frustrated in Silver Fox from the other point of view? Yeah.
Yes, I definitely was. I thought I also liked all of the scenes with her because like her dreams and everything I thought were so interesting to see, and like the way she was just slowly suffering but not allowed to die, like it was all just so beautifully done. And I definitely felt bad for her. I don't like Silver Fox as a person, but I think that her character created a lot of interesting stuff.
I loved Maib because I mean, what did you guys think about that? It's a different type of motherhood, right?
Very.
I thought it was very interesting.
I really liked it.
I did too.
In a lot of ways, very symbolic about motherhood, but very different than anything I've ever read in fantasy for sure.
Yeah, I mean, most times pregnancy, especially in fantasy, it's like a joyous thing or even a rebellious thing, right?
Yeah.
People aren't supposed to be having kids, or this kid is going to come in and then save the world or whatever it might be. And Erickson gives a much more well-rounded, or maybe I would even say maybe a little bit of a pessimistic view of motherhood here and the cost of that. And I like that a lot. Chris Hart says Maib is absolutely a metaphor made real in the craziest way. And I think that is true for a lot of Malazan, especially later on. There's a lot of metaphors that actually get embodied and you're just like, what? It's like high concept stuff that's really cool. So I love the Maib and Silver Fox storyline. I thought it was tremendous.
Yeah.
Not to digress too much from Silver Fox, but I did watch several other spoiler talks today to get ready for this. And there was one video I watched, which was Philip Chase and AP Canavan talking about this a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Jimmy, come on. And one of them brought up how much motherhood actually, just even beyond the Myb, is talked about in the book, between the Jackhoot mother in the prologue to the Kachin Shamali mother. I think, Kachin Shamali mother that's like smothering Talk later on. And
give him a hug.
I'm not going to try to summarize what they said, but it did bring to mind that how much motherhood is kind of discussed thematically and slightly differently in all three. And but to go back to Silver Fox, I liked that Tattersail was back. I was really intrigued by that because I remember connecting the dots from that really confusing part of Gardens of the Moon to how it starts in Memories of Ice. Was really satisfying to be like, oh, something actually makes sense. That was really confusing. And I think I liked her more in theory than in the actual execution by the end of it. Obviously, a kind of frustrating character to deal with the whole Talana Mas and the Myb controversy kind of towards the second third of the book. And but in theory, I really was happy to have Tattersail back, and was a little bummed that Tattersail didn't shine through as much through her, which of course is not supposed to. It's supposed to be an amalgamation of like multiple beings. So it would have probably been a little cheap for Erickson to just slap a new name on Tattersail and have her be back in the story. I think the way he did it was better, even if it didn't satisfy me as much because I liked the character in the first book.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I agree.
Joanna says it too. Like, I enjoyed Silver Fox's character, though I do wish we could have had more Tattersail in her original form in the series. And I think, that absolutely makes sense. I really enjoyed Silver Fox's character. I like the challenges that she gave all the characters around her. I do. Like, I watched that chat too, the one with AP and Philip, and I think it's awesome. But what they were talking about when they were talking about, like, I think it's a very common inner struggle for parents, but especially mothers who are deciding to have kids or who have kids, and they're trying to figure out, like, okay, what are the repercussions on me and my life and my personal choices for having a child and like having to raise a child and everything that goes along with that. And it's almost like Erickson took that argument and made it as in your face physical manifestation of it on paper between two characters who one is physically leeching off of the mother, and the mother like genuinely feels like she has nothing to give this world anymore at the end of that, especially because for a good chunk of this book, Silver Fox doesn't want to be around her and is constantly trying to avoid her. From Silver Fox's point of view, it's because she's trying to protect her. And this is her role and this is what she needs to do. And from the mother's point of view, it's just like, I'm still your mother, even though I get this and there's all these complications. There's still so much more, I feel like I should be a bigger part of your life. And I really enjoy that. I think it's a very, like, for the first half of this book, before we get to the big sieges and the battles and stuff, that was the main driver of this book for me. I think that was the relationship that I just got me to keep reading. Because I thought it was so interesting.
Yeah, and Philip says Memories of Ice is the mommy book of Malazan, and I think that's more embodied by Spindle's shirt being made of his dead mother's hair. Which is absolutely
iconic.
I mean, literally, I remember that was like
that's when I'm
serious. That was the moment I was like, "This is the series for me." But beyond mothers, it's really about kids too and childhood, and you can see this in the prologue, right, with the kids there. You can see with Silver Fox. You can see Talk the younger kind of become a child whenever he's getting his hugs again, right? He's been like reduced to almost a childlike figure in a lot of ways. And then Ganos has a line. He says, "Among the dead beneath me, how many adult voices cried out for their mothers? Death and dying makes us into children once again. In truth, one last time, there in our final wailing cries." So there is like a callback to the fact that we also were children at a time. So to help those children in the prologue makes a lot of sense, because I think we would have wanted someone to help us as well, even with a feud like the Amass and the Jackhuts. I think that's like, it's not all negative. I think some of it's also a positive look at childhood and maybe parenting.
Yeah.
Just curious, does anyone know, is Steven Erickson a parent?
Yes.
Okay. If I was his child, I might look at this book a little differently, but because it's some harsh views maybe, but also realistic. I mean, these are things that happen to parents, and the way it's embodied here is valid, honestly.
Yeah.
And that boy was Albert Einstein.
Crazy. Sarav brings up the point of like, not that they were just different people, but Piran and Tattersail, what they had in the first book was actually a casual fling, even though they believed it was something more serious, and even the people around them believe it was something more serious. And so you do get, for a little bit in this book, this hope from Piran, but also Whiskey Jack and Quick Ben and like the other people that are around him that, oh, we can dig out Tattersail out of Silver Fox. We can like, because everyone's terrified of Night Chill, but they're just like, if we just introduce Piran to Silver Fox and they start getting to hang out with each other, then maybe we can bring Tattersail more to the forefront. And then we can have a little bit more, we can bring Tattersail back. And obviously that doesn't happen. That's not how this happens. People change, and this is an entirely new being than both Night Chill and Tattersail. So do you guys have anything to say on like the relationship between Piran and Silver Fox? But also at the same time, so Piran's also found out that now he's like the master of the deck or something, that he holds the cards for.
I love his character so much as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't sold on like the romance there in the first book. I feel like romance in this series so far, or just like romantic connections in general, have for the most part felt like inconsequential compared to other stuff. Like they felt more like plot devices than like a sold romance to me. Like I feel like Piran, whatever, and Tattersail, like they were just like, hi, nice to meet you. We're stuck in this room together. Now we're in love. And I'm like, wait a minute. And same with like Whiskey Jack and Corlat. Was that who it was?
Yeah.
It was like 100 characters.
By
the end, I was kind of sold on the Whiskey Jack Corlat one, but it was the same thing where everything just kind of feels kind of insta love. So like in that sense, like when they were like, oh, Piran's gonna get with Tattersail again, I was like, if he does, he does. I don't know. Like I don't care. I was more interested to see if it would work, less so like excited about them getting back together.
Yeah. I think Corlat actually says straight to Whiskey Jack, like, hey, we should be in a romantic relationship or something like that.
Yeah,
it's just straight up on the nose. And it's just like Whiskey Jack's like, yeah, that sounds good. He's like trying to contemplate it, like, yeah, this
sure.
should work.
Why not?
And then it's a thing. And then it's just like, okay.
Literal insta love. I mean, literally like snap of the finger. I
definition.
Yeah, and I do think at first I was like, okay, like we'll see where this goes. But I actually, over the course, despite like the insta love spark, I felt like it felt more earned over the story.
It definitely did.
Kind of when they talk about their differences and their wishes to kind of leave all this behind, and she's like a several thousand-year-old being, and he's like a 40-year-old man, and just like the major differences and who they are as people. And obviously, with how everything ends with it, Whiskey Jack was kind of like icing on the cake of that. It all felt earned by the end. But yeah, the initial start, I was like, okay, well, let's see where this goes, I guess.
Yeah.
I think one thing to keep in mind as well is like, Corlat is a Tist-Andy, so like I'm not aware of how they do relationships and mating rituals and things like that. So I think that gives a little bit of a break for me, just because we don't know how this works out. And Whiskey Jack is out there in the battlefield. I mean, he's like, well, whatever, let's try it out. Like, why not? So I always leave a little bit of room for that, just knowing that with Erickson, Corlat's not Tist-Andy just to give her like something to be, right? Like his world building is always very intentional, and he actually does a phenomenal job of like really building out cultures and paying respect to the things that maybe even inspire these things. So I would assume somewhere in these bazillion words that the Tist-Andy's love interest, maybe it's in Carcanus, maybe it's in that trilogy outside of the main 10, but I would be very curious to see the romance habits of the Tist-Andy.
That would be cool. I think in addition to motherhood, we also get a huge look, and we have before in the past, but at just like general friendship and what certain people are willing to do for those they care about, like on a non-romantic level. And I think we get that here quite a bit, but I think right in the first half of the book, we get the whole relationship between, Quick Ben, Whiskey Jack, Piran, as all this stuff is coming to a head. We have Piran, who's now realizing, okay, he's like the master of the deck of dragons or whatever. Quick Ben, who is coming back with warnings saying like, hey, they're trying to raise the House of Chains, like the crippled god's coming back. It's trying to like warn everyone like what's actually going on here and the real threats. And Whiskey Jack, and basically you have people like there's a scene which I forget the actual specifics of it, but there's a scene where Piran is like, they're trying to explain to him the House of Chains and the crippled god and why he has been feeling sick and like why he's been feeling this weight of like why he's been violently ill for the first chunk of this book. And they basically say that even if it causes the crippled god to come back, like even if it causes the House of Chains to be risen, like you have to do what you have to do for the betterment of yourself. And they're like willing to do that, even though they know the repercussions of a certain choice being made. And so, you know, that's something that happens in the beginning of this book, but I think friendship is just a huge thing that gets played a lot in this book. And that's just one that jumps out to me with this group of people.
I think like one of my favorite parts of this book and like some of my favorite scenes throughout the book were the big gatherings of people, kind of going off what you were saying, because they kept having like these war rooms or whatever. And those were some of the coolest scenes to just see like all these powerful people in a room, and like especially with the way like how Rake communicates with everyone, and then like Whiskey Jack being the down to earth one, and then Quick Binge just like chaos, like just the whole group is just seeing all of that interaction was so cool. It was like some of my favorite scenes, having all those people in the room at the same time.
Yeah, I said a lot of times in Malazan, my favorite moments weren't actually the sieges and the big war. It was when two characters that had never met before meet each other. And Rake and Whiskey Jack meet in this book. And it's like everything to me.
Their friendship is so good.
And this is why I always push back when people say that, you know, Malazan just doesn't have good characters. And it's like, well, what do you mean by good character? Do you mean that you don't know everything they ate yesterday? Yes. When 7 of them are in a war council, do you know each individual voice? Yes, you do. You know who they are, and they interact with each other. That's a way of that's very real. Like the one thing I figured out about Steven Erikson when I ended the 10-book series was I was like, he is probably one of the best friends you could ever have, because that dude understands friendship, and he writes some of the best buddy duos. Like Mappo and Akarium's great, but there's even better in the series. And it's always my pick for, you know, a lot of people say like Locke and Jean or whatever from Lies of Locke and other series. But yeah, this series really does have some of the best friendships.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think
underrated. I think
they
don't get, like just two buddies can make a story like just completely take off done well, and have more than one of that. I mean, there's already several in this series that are all done well. It just brings it up completely.
Yeah, and platonic relationships between male and female, which is apparently illegal in fantasy because it never happens. Well, I know I'm being hyperbolic, but it feels like it that people can never just be friends. And you see this with the Marines a lot in the series, and I always love that.
Yeah, and I mean, similarly, although like she's like multiple beings in one, you have Silver Fox and Krupp, who, you know, amidst it all end up becoming like the duo, one of the main duos of this book. And you know, I know Kevin was talking about Krupp in the book, but I think Krupp, I know people give him shit, but like I don't mind him at all. I actually think
he's so good.
Counteracts so much of the stuff that's going on in the book that I enjoy his character.
His wordplay just like always brings, like everyone is dying around him and he'll say something and I'm like, this guy's cool.
I'm so glad. Pat, do you like Krupp?
I don't know how anybody could really dislike Krupp.
I thought that eye roll was I hate it.
No, did I eye roll? No, I was just reading the chat. No, I love Krupp. Sorry, I didn't mean to look like
I was terrified. I thought you were about to tell me I can't.
No, I was reading.
I don't understand.
I love Krupp.
Can't be part of our group anymore.
Krupp is awesome. I mean, you need. I wouldn't even say he's a necessarily funny character, but as an offbeat character, it's just a nice change of pace sometimes. Where it's like, oh, okay, what's going on in Krupp's head? What's he gonna say? And just the fact that he's a regular. I mean, on paper, started out as a regular guy from Darujistan, and he's like at these war councils and gets Kaladin Brood's hammer thrown down on him and somehow reflects it or just absorbs it. I mean, I don't care what you
You can
say.
do that.
That's awesome and fun.
Yeah.
I don't care. You want to argue power levels and that it's BS and that it shouldn't have happened. I don't care. But it was a cool thing to see happen, and it just added to kind of the allure of this just offbeat, weird character. And I really want to see where he's going from here because he's already reached some pretty crazy heights, getting involved with Karul and kind of fostering Silver Fox. I'm like, what? I don't know if he's going to be in every book, but there's probably at least a few more books he's going to be in. And I'm like, what's in store with this guy?
Yeah. I feel like there's way more to him. And he is just like way more. He has his hands in way more things than we may think.
I feel like we keep getting like little tidbits. I think he's gonna be like the big.
He's a crippled god.
Okay. Yeah, like he's about to be like the most powerful dude or something because like we got a little bit of it in Gardens of the Moon. We got a little bit like he's gonna be something big. No spoilers, anyone. But that's my prediction because he's not what he looks like. I think.
Yeah, Pat, I agree with you. It's just like. He's almost essential for like I get when people say like he's like really goofy and stuff, but I like that because I think there's so much
I stuff need it
that is going on in this book, and I mean, one chapter you have like Children of the Dead Sea, and then I'm okay with Krupp coming.
Yeah, please, Krupp. I need Krupp right now. There's
this scene where Krupp is talking to the two guards for Silver Fox.
And God.
Tremendous. There's a scene where Krupp is talking to the two guards for Silver Fox, and they explain why Whiskey Jack would have been an amazing ruler over Lysine, and it was like super illuminating to how well respected Whiskey Jack was. And it was a really good way of putting that onto the page because when people talk about Malaz, a lot of people mention Whiskey Jack. And I remember coming out of Gardens of the Moon being like, it was cool. Like he was fine. But this is the book where I was like, oh, I love it. And then of course
this is the book.
This is the book
where he wins.
Okay. Yeah. So just the loyalty that he has and for Krupp to see that. And, Krupp's a very perceptive person. I think he tuned into that and took that information. But I mean, him stopping Khalid Brood's hammer, which we know can end worlds. I mean, that's not on accident, right?
There's something we don't know, maybe. And speaking of characters that maybe have a little bit of like a more goofy, offbeat side to them, I was just curious. I want to get everyone's take on Lady Envy because I feel like in a lot of chats she kind of goes under the radar, but she was actually maybe one of my. For per page, she's not on a ton of page. She doesn't have a huge page count, but just like on a lower level page count, probably one of my favorites of the entire book. Just curious how you guys felt about her because sometimes she's got a little bit like a funny, almost like Sanderson-ish banter to her that may not fit some of the really powerful beings that we've met so far, but it worked really well for me. So I'm just curious how you guys felt about her as like a character and like her personality and all.
I didn't mind her as a character, but I found myself every time we would switch to that storyline, I think I was most confused by it. So I was always least excited for it because I just had no idea what was going on with any of those people. I know we knew some of them that were in that group, but I was like, where are they? Like, I kept forgetting what their goal was. I didn't know where they were going. I was like, I don't know who, and I think that might be because of how long it took me to read the book, and because she didn't have as much page time. But every time we got to them, I was like, I don't know what anyone's motivations in this group are. I don't know what anyone's doing. But I thought that her like levity she brought was fun. I thought that her like dialogue was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I just love that she's very lighthearted, but she's I think a daughter of one of the characters in the person who made Dragon.
Starts with a D. Yeah, I can't remember his name.
I just something about her power level and just her joking around with Talk and when they're like about to take on the tennis Scoury, and I don't know, something about that juxtaposition worked really well for me. It's almost like when you're that powerful, you don't need to be serious, which is kind of maybe a more realistic idea than the super dark and serious, ultra powerful character. So I thought it was like a breath of fresh air.
Kind of reminds you of the gods in Dragon Ball Super, if anyone's ever seen that. And they're like just concerned with what planets have to eat while they're destroying like universes. It's pretty funny. It feels kind of like the same vibe that I get from Lady MV, but she has a great arc because at the end she figures out that Rake killed her father, right? Like
Mhm.
that's kind of the end point for her. But she opens up the book with one of my favorite scenes in the book, and it's whenever Tool is beating some Segula ass while talking. And Segulas have been
So
hyped up
good.
as these like unbeatable warriors, and then you have tooling with them, and you're like, how powerful is
Yeah,
Tool?
like Tool comes out of it just being like,
I love Tool, dude. One of my favorite
So
things.
good.
yeah, his scenes of this book are awesome.
Really are.
Yeah, I love the Segula, and like as you mentioned, that like there'll be like a conversation between, in my head at least, when I think back, it's like Lady Envy and Talk are like chatting about whatever the plan is, and then it's like cuts back to Tool throwing them through a wall, and it's like your brain can like see it cinematically, the way like it's so casual to Lady Envy, but Talk is like, are we gonna just talk about this insane fight going on right here?
Yeah.
And I just thought the Segula, as just in general, were pretty cool. There are a lot of these like tribal races that come through in Deadhouse Gates and here in Memories of Ice. That the Segula, sometimes they don't stand out, especially more in Deadhouse Gates when you're kind of on the chain of dog. There's all those different tribes, but the Segula, and then whatever is it, Pots? What are the other tribal race that help, that come to the aid of Whiskey Jack? I think Perrin goes. The Trots. I'm sorry, not Pots. Trots. What's his race called?
Someone,
I
I don't know if
don't
somebody can remind us.
I can't remember.
Anyways,
who you're
those
talking
type of
about.
like adding some
Rivy.
like civilization and
Rivy.
culture to these new races
Rivy.
and tribes, I thought worked really well here. Yeah,
Is it
no,
Rivy?
not the Rivy. Rivy is what I think Smybe is, right?
That is what my
Barghast.
Yeah, Barghast. Yeah, I love the Barghast
Barghast.
scene where is it
Everyone
Trots
said
fighting?
Barghast.
Someone's fighting, and they're doing like a trial by combat to see who will like lead the Barghast, and it's like I think a teenager is like the one fighting for the Barghast, and then comes through. I forget who he fights, but I think he ends up killing him, or like hooks, or they are able to heal him, but I can't remember who it was. But that was a really good scene too. I like that implementation of the like tribal civilizations. It adds some good lore back in the background to all of it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we got 4 comments saying Barghast. Thanks everybody.
Yeah, Barghast.
If the Barghast are definitely a big piece of the story, and again, that's another total group of people that Erickson puts a lot of care into.
That's what I'm saying. It's great.
Really dives into them, and that is the thing that I don't know if I've ever read an author who cares more about every word that they pin than Erickson, and that goes beyond just word choice, diction. And his sentence structures, but also into like what he's putting into the story. There's no throwaway like, oh, this is like an Eastern culture, we'll just do that. Like that's not how it works. He's very careful, and that's why they all feel very distinct and cool.
Yeah.
I with Lady Envy, I really enjoyed her. I think what everyone's saying, like, oh, she's very over the top, hilarious, counteracts everything that is kind of going on. I totally agree. Jordan, I do agree with you. I think slightly for a little bit of the book, probably in the beginning, I was kind of having trouble wrapping my head around what was going on, and just kind of a lot of this new stuff that was being thrown at us, whether it was just the different races and, the Segula, and eventually they could change Chamala, and like all this stuff that was just coming out of nowhere for the first time. It was took a little bit for me to wrap my head around, but once I got it, I just felt like I was enjoying her character, that whole storyline much, much more. So yeah, I definitely liked that. Before we move in, one more point I want to bring up before we move into like the bulk of this book, which is the Siege of Capistan and everything else that happens. But I think a really cool thing that happens that is like a main driver of this book is the fact that we have these two groups of people, and a variety of other groups that are in here as well, who kind of have to team up with each other to fight the Tenniscowry and this whole, the Panyan Doman, this whole group of people that we're hearing about after just fighting each other and are like who are at contentions at each other's throats 2 books ago, and they're now having to like, okay, put that aside. We have a bigger threat on the line, and I think this is like a very realistic thing that happens all the time in real life and in history, and I feel like we don't get this a lot in fantasy. So I loved this look because I think it's a very real representation of kind of global conflict and conflict between variety of different groups where no one's on the same page, but there's definitely some trade-offs that have to happen because nothing is A beats B, then
That's
beats
right.
C. It's just like a mess. So I really enjoyed that.
I feel like every time we change the topic, I realize that we could have like 8 live streams about this show and
Oh
like,
my gosh, yeah, these books
about this book. Like it's wild. Anyway, sorry.
I mean, there's
You
a
brought
reason
up the
why.
Pain and Endowment, and I was like, they're like the big bad in the book, and we haven't even talked about them yet.
I know, we haven't talked about the pain.
There's a reason why some people, just read Malazan over and over, because you can attach
believe
yourself to a
it,
piece
yeah.
of those things. And a lot of these threads do keep going throughout the series in different ways, and he explores them in through different lenses. And I agree with you, Alex. I think that's one of the things that makes the Malazan scope grander than anything else written in fantasy, is that those type of things do happen. Like it actually feels global. The continents that we jump to and stuff feel real. And it's because of things like this that there's always a conflict, but there's always a bigger conflict out there and a different way to look at it. We even get recontextualized about what happened at Pale in this book towards the end, which I'm sure we will talk about with Whiskey Jack and Lacine and the Bridge Burners. So
yeah. So Ross is also how about Animator Rake defending the Malazans and how Malazan's way of conquering actually helps those places. I actually forgot about this because this is brought up a couple times in this book where people start defending the Malazan Empire almost like straight up. That's what they're doing. And they are fully aware of, all the negativity and all the consequence of something of an empire that big invading and everything that comes with that. But also, hey, here's all the good that's happened. This might be here's all the good that's happening as a result of it. And this also might be our best option if we want to have a brighter future. Like this might be our best way forward. Everything else might be way worse than this. So maybe we should stop trying to rule it out completely and try to side with it to help get rid of some of these worst things that are out there. So
those things
I
were like that whole like that every time that happened, it was really hard for me to like digest, because just having the context of like our world and how bad imperialism has been for our world, and then seeing people be like, well, look, this could be good though. In my head, I wanted to be like, it absolutely cannot be. But then like trying to look at it from like the lens of the people in a world that is not mine, like it kind of made sense. But it was like every time it kind of made me stop and think, because it's very hard to digest being like, no, this could be good in different circumstances.
Yeah, I think I heard Erickson say once that the Malaz imperialism is supposed to kind of be a little bit like the Roman imperialism, and how it was obviously it's a sensitive topic, so it's tough to say, but like there were examples where maybe it possibly helped the region. Depending on how it went. So it's just it's the fact that everything is nuanced. Like everything is nuanced. Erickson very rarely gives answers to things, but he'll show a good example of this, and then next book he might show a bad example of this. And you might you won't know what way to think by the end of the series.
I mean, he made the Malazan Empire look really bad in the first book, and then this one was kind of flipped. So
and then you got people fighting for the Malaz Empire, who are then basically assassinated or attempted assassination and then you're like, but they're still kind of fighting for the Malaz Empire, and then it was planned because they wanted them to be able to go with Kaladin.
That's one thing. After like, I basically have stopped trying to decipher who's on what side. I'm just like, they'll say it at some point, and then it'll be true for 15 minutes, and then they'll flip. So I just don't even try to follow who's on what side. Like when everyone's in a war room, I'm like, okay, so they're all together right now. So that's now I'm here now.
Side A.
It's too hard to keep track of because that's what one of my biggest struggles with the first book was. I was trying to keep track of who was on what side, and I was like, you just can't do that.
That's a good point. We get both sides. Well, Stephen says we get both sides of the coin as far as imperialism goes. Shades of gray for sure, and I think that's definitely right. I think a lot of times in fantasy, and we do get it here, and we'll get into this, but you get like the evil kingdom that is taking over this world of light, and there's no definition as to why they're doing it other than causing chaos. And there's no like, let's get the other side of the view. Maybe the kingdom of light isn't actually the kingdom of light and vice versa. And so I think there's just everything's much more layered here. There's way more things at play. And you could totally understand why someone in either side of this coin might feel one way or the other about their kingdom or what their empire that they are a part of for a specific situation. So I love that. I think it just makes it feel a little bit more relatable because, as we all know, everyone in probably every country in the world has differing views on wherever they're a part of and like whatever nation or place that they live.
Yeah, and also there's
so much
individuals behind the flag, behind the uniform. There's an individual who might just happen to be there. And their circumstances.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that is very much at what Erickson's trying to get at. And one of the reasons why he loved Black Company is because you zoomed into the boots on the ground and Glenn Cook. And I know that Erickson has said that like Glenn Cook is like instrumental in the fantasy genre for finally zooming in on the grunts. And I think that that's a really big piece of Malazan as well.
Yeah.
Just to comment on like the nuance, I think somebody mentioned earlier how it's so easy to look at the Malazans as kind of the antagonist, at least from an imperialist standpoint in the first book. Like if you imagine you're a citizen of Pale and you're getting just about destroyed by, you know, these people coming in and just trying to take over straight up, you would go, those are the bad guys. But then you are on the same continent, Genebacus in book 3, and the Tenescari are coming for you, and maybe the Malazans might save you from that like terror. Then they're the good guys, and it does kind of just show the nuance that when you have that level of power, like empire level power, you can wield it in a lot of different ways, and who's being impacted by it is going to be the one defining whether or not you're good or bad.
Definitely. And if their motivation for doing said thing is negative or overall greed, it doesn't really matter if your life's on the line. Like it's like, well,
it's that or dead. So
yeah, it is what it is.
Yep. There's a lot of perspective manipulation in this series, like on a grand scale and then on an individual scale, which is really cool.
Just wait.
Oh, I bet. With that said, let's talk about the Panion Doman and the Tenescari and this whole new kind of group of people that we start getting, and we're like, oh wow, the Malazan Empire is not as bad as we thought compared to everything
things
else
got real dark real quick.
What did you guys think of this whole new kingdom and the Panion Doman? And we can kind of just lump in everything else here. So Children of the Dead Sea, Tenescari, all the fun and happiness that's going on over there.
I'll just say it is dark and weird and grimy and horrible, but I have to admit that from the moment that we kind of, I guess you would maybe say when the Kell Hunters, is that what they're called? From the moment they're introduced and the threat is slowly unveiled, and then you see the full extent of like the Siege of Capistan, that chunk of the book I probably enjoyed. If that was its own book, it'd be one of my all-time favorite books. This book would be my all-time.
I agree. Book part 3 is
like 1,000 out of 10. I loved every bit of it. And part of it is because Erickson went there. If it was just a siege of soldiers, they're taking over Capistan, they're going to fight. Okay, seen this a few times, but it still can be well done. But when it's like World War Z bodies crawling over bodies to just eat
like
people.
This high.
Yeah. And some of the imagery he uses later on, literally about bodies piling up and how I think it's Gruntl's people they're in a house that is layering bodies that they are using to their defense.
Yep.
All of it. I seriously, that would be some of my favorite portion of any book I've ever read. It was just so well done.
No, I totally agree.
And again, it's because he went there. He made it special with those weird choices. And I'll never forget it. That's for sure. I've read hundreds of sieges probably in fantasy, and I've forgotten a lot of them. I'll never forget Capistan.
I never want to spend a day in this man's head. I don't want to. I couldn't. The Children of the Dead Sea. I remember I read that and I was like, am I misunderstanding? Because half the time in this book, I'm like, I'm probably just misunderstanding. I read it a few times. I was like, no, that's what it really is. So I was like, okay. But the whole Siege of Capistan, Again, my like favorite part of all of it was every time we got Ikovian and his like whole thing, like him taking on all of the stuff on from everyone and like just surviving it. I was just like, who is this dude? And I was upset every time his point of view came up, especially during this big siege. It was so good. I loved all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, Children of the Dead seed is a real thing.
I hate that. I didn't actually need to know that.
I'm not saying it happened that way. I'm not saying it happened that way, but this is a thing that has happened. I'm not saying on a mass scale, but like one, it's possible, and two, it's been done. So
Erickson definitely picked that up from like a National Geographic magazine. Was like, let me put that.
We don't kink shame here at Tall Guy Reads. We don't kink shame, okay?
No.
I think we do at a certain line.
I just want to add one thing while we were talking about the siege that is particularly well done by Erickson is I'm like very spatially minded person in general. And when I'm reading books and battles, I really like to have a clear picture of north, south, east, west, where people are fighting, what's going on here and there. And a lot of authors, and even Erickson at times, I had trouble visualizing some of his battles in Deadhouse Gates when they're like crossing rivers and these things. I thought one of the best things about Capistan and helped that I think he included a map of the city that I was referring to. I felt like I knew what was going on like every street and every major corridor. And it really lended itself to feeling like an all-encompassing experience. Because you would hear about Ikovians going south to this tower to increase defense. And then who's that guy? Grunzel, he looks like a tiger running there or whatever. He's doing a thing with a flag and they have bodies everywhere. It was just so perfectly executed in that regard that you felt like you were almost there watching from above the city, everything happening.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love the way he kind of bounced back and forth pretty rapidly throughout this. It was almost like Abercrombie-esque in a way. We get the zoomed in siege and we're bouncing between all these different point of views and they keep referring to each other. So like you were saying, you have from a Kovian's viewpoint, you're like, oh, there's this man who's just going absolutely buck wild at just killing everyone. And then you're like, oh, that's Gruntle. And then you go back to Gruntle and you see after the fact, he's just like covered in blood and he's just like huffing and puffing. And he's just like, who is this guy? Like, where? And
he's like always like on to the next thing. Like Gruntle's, and I think at some point he even questions himself, like, what's coming over me? Like, why do I have this drive to fight? I think he knows initially when he starts the fight with everything that happens with Stony and the child's clothing. But as he becomes the Treach Mortal Sword, which I think kind of happens through the siege, if I remember correctly, it's really fun to be in his head. And he's just like, I'm fighting and we're just going to keep going and we're going to keep dropping bodies until this is over.
That's when he grew on me, really. Like all of those scenes with him just continue. I was like, okay, this dude's pretty cool.
Yeah, the payoff is great from like the, unhappy caravan guard to that is just a lot of fun to read.
Would you say he's disgruntled?
Oh gosh, maybe there's something there. I don't know.
It's a very Black Company thing of him to do, but yeah, it definitely.
What to name him after their primary emotion?
Yeah, either an ironic name or like a spot on name. You know, like One Eye is somebody from Black Company who has one eye. That's how like that stuff works in military. The Siege of Capistan is, I mean, one of the most epic things I've ever read until further in the series where there's something, in my opinion, that's bigger. And then after that, there's something that's bigger, which is crazy. The thing I like, so one thing that's really, really interesting, and Pat, if you had trouble visualizing Deadhouse Gates battles, there's actually a channel here on YouTube that shows you exactly what happened, and it's fascinating because
I used it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. He does an amazing job showing. I think I read the first one and I was like, I don't know if I understood that. And I saw he had a video. So I went back and watched it and it cleared it up. And then I noticed he had multiple other videos for Deadhouse Gates. So I'm like, okay, well, if a battle comes up, I'm coming back to this guy's channel. And he helped a lot because I know I would not have really understood.
I also struggled with it. And I remember talking with Alan about it and a couple other people. And it's just really impressive, the detail that Erickson puts into things. And one of the biggest complaints I had from the first two books was like, he keeps telling me how far things are. Like it was 4 foot tall. I'm like, I don't care. But then you look back and you're like, oh, he's an archaeologist and like he measures distance from things. And it's like, this all makes sense. And it's not just he's not trying. he's not trying to pad the descriptions, right? He's actually going into proper details and stuff. It's really impressive. And to have the perspective of someone who's an archaeologist is definitely worth its weight, I think, when writing a fantasy story that's this scale that goes over so much time. Because Capustan might be uncovered, in a million years on this planet, right? And people are going to be able to figure out what happened here. But yeah, I think that this, out of many of the things in Malazan, if I could see this on the big screen, like think of a Helm's Deep level, but Capustan, with just full gore, I think it would just be one of the craziest things ever.
Yeah. I think I've seen like in a few interviews, spoiler free ones before I read the series with Erickson, whenever it would ever come up about like adaptations for his books, he's always been like, if they were going to adapt anything, I just want them to do a Memories of Ice adaptation, because he feels like that's the most adaptable in many ways.
Story. It's a good contained story. Yeah.
Yeah. And I totally agree. I think I was reading this book and I was just like, this just seems like the most ridiculous but epic thing ever. Like the descriptions of what is going on the ground during the siege of Capstan is almost, it's purposely over the top in a way that just, like, I'll never forget it. Like you were saying, Pat, like, I mean, bodies climbing to the ceiling, the people coming into the middle of the street and looking at the steps going up to the buildings and stuff. And it's just like covered in bodies. It's just piles of bodies that you have seen used as barriers for other people who are attacking. And it's just like, wow, this is war is hell. And he's really showing you like the actual, like realistic repercussion of something like this.
And think about this battle, and we're talking about how epic and this, there's raptors with swords for arms, and it stands in contrast with like so much of what is popular in fantasy, right?
Yep.
Whether there's a dash of magic, or magic is something that is going out of the world, like a Song of Ice and Fire. It's not really there. Maybe it's coming back a little bit. Even like the Wheel of Time has magic, and it is high fantasy, but it's like Erickson said, I'm going to make all the complaints that people have about fantasy as a genre, like, oh, you can just do magic with your hands, you can do this, you can do that. And Erickson's like, I'm going to embrace all of those things that people say are bad things and make you cry. I'm going to make you feel, because there's still a story to be told there that people can digest, like fine literature. And I don't know. That's one of the things I love about Malazan, and I think some people don't know, is that it's high fantasy. It's the highest fantasy. It is. There's no holding back. And I wish more authors just went for it. Like, I wish more authors just go over the top. Like, you can do it. Yeah. It takes a lot of skill, but I don't know. There's nothing like Malazan when it comes to scale, scope, and battles. Like, there really just isn't.
Yeah. I've been saying since book 1 that my favorite thing about this series so far is the scale of the magic. Just like, like it's just like, so cool. Like, and I don't need to know how it works. Like, I do really appreciate a hard magic system, but like in this case, like I don't need to know how it works. I do like that we learned a lot more about the Warrens in this one, but even still, like just all the magic is so dope. Like I don't care. I don't care how it's happening. I just want more because it's so cool to watch. It's my favorite part of the series for sure. Because like you were saying, it's people, like authors don't go that big normally. They scale back. They try to explain it all. And Erickson's just like, he came out of nowhere. Quick Bin has like 800 dudes in him or whatever. Like,
it's also like unlockable for anyone. It's not, it is power, obviously, but it's just readily available to all people, regardless of gender or of age. And it's kind of like a step back from all of that stuff. Whereas like something like Wheel of Time, it's all that. I mean, that's what it's all revolving around, is like the gender dynamics, which, hasn't aged well in my opinion. But this series, it's not restricted to just, only men can do this or only women can do it. It's very open, and I think it's one of the charms of Malazan without ever being in your face about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you got, so this is all started from a tabletop RPG campaign that Erickson had, right? Mm-hmm. Or something he did with Ian Esselmont and somebody else way back in the day. And I haven't played a ton of them, but I played a fair amount of tabletop RPGs, and I feel like the way Magic's implemented isn't. I can see where it got its start, where a really powerful mage character from a tabletop RPG who can literally shoot a beam of magic at a city and blow it up, which you don't start with that in a lot of fantasy stories. I can kind of see that beginning for Erickson there, and it just works really well on the page. That the fact that he went for it.
And so much of the like magic and combat and everything has so much of that tabletop RPG influence. Like I play a lot of D&D, and I can totally see all of that influence in this because it, like you were saying, like you can see like while there's not like classified classes or anything, you can definitely see like everyone has their own kind of thing that they do, and they all like the combat scenes all feel very D&D combat. It's one of the reasons I love the series.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I heard is that they felt constrained by the rule set in the world, so they just did their own and rolled their own stuff. And
let's write it, wipe away the rules.
Yeah, now you have Tistandy. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And it wasn't even D&D. Like I'm pretty sure the game they use, I think it's called GURPS, and it's like a really, even a step farther than D&D, like a really intense, like build your own setup of a world and magic and all that. And the fact that that wasn't enough. And it just shows they must have taken it like super seriously, because I'm guessing a lot of this lore started there, and he took the time. I mean,
I think so. Yeah,
but he eventually put it on page, but it started as like a thing they were doing together, and it just. I don't know if all of you play them or not, but the magic of that type of creating a story with friends is just amazing. And then to see it come to this level, it just shows you how limitless it can be.
Yeah, Erickson always said that it was always meant to be like a dual project. Like he always wanted Esselmont. Like a lot of people were like, "Oh, Esselmont started publishing." I was like, "No, this was always the plan, that we were both going to write books." And I think that I mean that's, and we talked about friendship. Pretty clear that's a big part of his life and his journey.
Best buddy duo.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. I couldn't imagine if I had, something with my friend that so many people enjoyed, and also was such an achievement in something that we were passionate about. I think it's just tremendous.
Yeah, I mean, they had a lot of it. They definitely had a lot of it, because what did he write this all in? 10 years or something? He wrote like these 10 books.
Well, Gardens of the Moon he worked on for quite a long time.
That's true.
It was a screenplay, and then it was a book, and I think he worked on it for like somewhere between like 6 to 10 years. But yeah. After that, he signed like one of the most historic book deals in Canadian history, and wrote these books in 10 years. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That is
so we've gotten
insane.
Andy has kids. I don't know how he did it.
They helped write it.
Yeah. Was an archaeologist. Like
true. All right. So we've gotten a lot of comments about Siege of Capistan that I kind of want to touch on. So first one, in the Siege of Capistan, how about the betrayal and sacrifice of Bruchalion and Hood coming himself to collect him? Anyone have thoughts of Bruchalion? I'm just going to pronounce it that way in this whole scene.
Is this when they get betrayed by the mask of Fenner or whatever? I forget the guy's name, but it's at the temple, and he basically turns Bruchalion over to the Teniscowry.
I believe so. But that's
he's the guy who represents their god in the Council of the Masks or whatever. Totally flips on the Grey Swords, who are fighting in honor of that god. I'm just trying to remember. This part's a little hazy to me. I'm just trying to.
Same. I was Googling it.
I know that this happens close to whatever all the Conatus, is that how you say his name, happens with.
Yes.
Covian. I can't remember who's who, though, to be quite honest. I just remember that Bruchalion I was not super attached to, but I felt his scene where he died. Like I still felt it, and I was like, oh wow. Yeah. Like that was actually really impactful, and for a character that I didn't have really any attachment to.
Yeah. That's actually a good point, because I feel like at this point we know that death isn't always the end for so many of these characters in this series, but nevertheless, the scenes where people die or characters die in these books, most of them have hit me pretty hard, even if it's just like a character I didn't feel super invested in. Most of the time, if it's like a death that is focused on, it's handled in a way that I'm just like, wow, okay, that came out of nowhere, that happened, and I don't know.
Also, his death was so epic. It was so crazy. Like his sword exploding as he died. Like what? So good.
We haven't talked about Corporal Broach and Bauchelain and like everything else going on with Bauchelain's with like Idcovian and them, right? Like I believe.
There are
Is it the
so
same?
many.
No, they
Brainer.
were they hired caravan guards. I don't think they're with it. I don't know if eventually they kind of
No,
are
like
alongside them.
at Capistan. I don't know. Maybe.
No, they end up in Capistan, but I know they start as they hire some. Is it Gruntle? Some of Gruntle's people or his companions as he hires them as they hire them as caravan guards.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think they're present when the Kachane Shamale Gale hunters first show up. I want to say,
Yeah.
and help like kind of save or prevent complete bloodshed, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah, he's gonna bring that up. Like, the Kachane Shamala. There's all this talk about them. Like everyone keeps returning and showing up. Oh, they're these demons, and everyone keeps calling them demons, and that's like talked about them. And then you're like, oh, these reptilian creatures with swords for arms. And I had heard that this was in the series, but I was expecting it to be like Reaper's Gale or something like far in the series and not this soon. So when this started happening, I was like, I think I know what this is. And I got super excited. And I remember Googling it and just Google imaging it because I didn't want to see like any spoil myself or anything. And I was just like, the first picture of the Kachane Shamala, I was like, holy shit, this is awesome.
I remember you
Just like,
messaged me and you were like, have you gotten to the Kachane Shamala yet? And I was like, yeah. And you're like, look at this picture.
It was just like so wild.
So cool.
But yes, that scene, it's all worked up, it's all built up, and then all of a sudden, you know, they finally appear, and the gray swords are there, and manage to, you know, successfully avoid a absolute complete catastrophe while being attacked.
I just want to add, Alex, you mentioned you heard about them before the series. I also did, and I remember, I don't know, I was watching somebody's like spoiler-free review of like Gardens of the Moon a while ago, and they were saying, oh, there's so many different races, like different than, it's not just humans, you know, we have bug people like the Moranth and other things that are just really interesting. I remember Googling like, oh, I wonder, like, it's such an in-depth series. I Googled like Malazan races, and somebody had drawn a diagram of like the 10 common races you see, and then it's like all of them, and then it's like Kachane Shamala. I'm like, that's a fucking dinosaur. Like, what? I was like, whoa. And I think I had heard another time later that they had swords for arms and all that, and I was like, okay, this could be something interesting.
It could either be really stupid or really
right.
dope. And
yeah,
I'm
I was like,
so
this
glad
is
it was
piqued my
dope.
interest for sure because we have a distinct lack of dinosaurs in
Can I zoom this
in fantasy.
Yes,
oh
you are.
wow,
It's
I haven't
so
seen that
cool.
one. That is awesome.
I mean, look at this. Like this is this is insanity.
I did not imagine the swords so huge.
I
But
think
now
it's
it actually makes more sen's why they're so horrible. Because in my head, I remember imagining like, how do they chop so
A
big? They
human-sized
have, like,
sword
arms.
on a T-Rex.
It's a little hard to imagine, but now it makes sense.
Just like on there.
like I don't know if my imagination can keep up with this series. Like that's one of the biggest issues I have is I'm not a visual reader. So when I see something like this and I start thinking back about scenes, I'm like, oh my God, like that had to have been so cool. I wish I could visualize. That'd be sick.
Yeah. That's why I usually, you know, like Google images. I just go right there because I want to avoid any spoilers or anything. But that's helped me quite a bit for a variety of parts in the series. Just like getting some type of image because I'm the same way. There's some stuff that I just really have trouble visualizing, and it's not until at least seeing a picture or something just really makes it. Oh wow, okay, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Also, the art, the ones that have armor on are also so cool.
So dope.
Yeah.
Now I want a T-Rex with sword.
Another thing that feels like it came from their RPG game, where one day they're like on to the next fight, and Ericsson's like, "Well, now we got dinosaurs," and his players are like, "Okay," and he's like, "With swords for arms," and then drops that. It's like it just feels like a creation that way, and then again, it comes into the story and works. It's just amazing
and works.
Yeah, seriously, like it doesn't feel fake or unearned because, like I think someone mentioned earlier, like dinosaurs could be dumb in a fantasy story, but they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, someone said this a little earlier, but they're like Ericsson hates anime, but created an anime, and it's like
Literally.
yeah, kind of.
Yeah, the action definitely feels like a lot of those scenes definitely have that.
When
Could you
Gruntle is
imagine
the
it?
tiger, something
Oh my
about
gosh.
that, and I still don't know how to visualize it because it's like he's with his fighters alongside him who follow him or whatever, and they become this tiger. Something about that felt very anime-ish to me. We're just imagining them into this amalgamation of like a transparent tiger like fighting. Something about that just really stuck out to me as like hard to visualize,
Power
but also I
Rangers.
could see
The
it.
Power Rangers.
Hollywood would mess this up so bad.
Oh,
So
so bad.
Like,
So bad.
In a
Oh my
lot of
God.
ways, I
Be
wish
Michael
that-
Bay.
Oh God, please no. Shia LaBeouf as Ganos Perron. I'm like, no, we're not doing that.
Now we need a separate live stream where we just fan cast a Malazan movie.
You know, and that is another thing, by the way, that I love about Malazan, and I'm sure you guys have noticed it by now. But there are people who look different, different skin tones. Like it's just like a melting pot, and none of it feels heavy-handed. None of it feels it just is.
Yeah.
And that is so important, I think, with representation. Quick Ben is a great example as well. So I don't want to see anybody casting Henry Cavill as Quick Ben, or I'm throwing hands.
Yeah. Oh my God.
God damn it.
Absolutely walk out. So yeah, I guess Siege of Capistan, we also get kind of the end. Well, not the end, but the beginning of the end for Eidkovian as a character and his fulfillment and kind of what he believes are his responsibilities. I'm like blanking on the name of the god that's tied to him, but I believe that god by the end of this battle is gone. And then is that right? And then he ends up giving the command of the group of soldiers to that other character.
Is it
Anyone remember?
Fenner? Is that
I believe. I guess once Brucalion was the mortal sword of Fenner, and then wait, I don't think that.
There's a couple like Treach and Fenner obviously come up the most in terms of these mortal sword beings.
Yeah.
And I remember with Fenner, I was trying to think back because in Deadhouse Gates he comes up a lot because of the person alongside Fellison who was a priest of Fenner. And so I was trying to think back to when Fenner's like gone and what happens there with because I know they're alongside each other. I remember trying to think back what's happening now with Fenner and how it's affecting Eidkovian. Does that come into play like midway through Deadhouse Gates? And I think
this is it.
I think there's some stuff with it. Can't remember exactly.
So it is Fenner. He was pulled down to the mortal realm in Deadhouse Gates by Hiboric, so he's not in power anymore. Okay, that's
right.
And that whole those two stories alongside each other, I'm sure if you read them, whenever I read them again and try to read them close together, there's probably more that you could pull that are like, oh, that's a connection. Because I know there's a moment in Deadhouse Gates where I think Quick Ben contacts Kalam. And he's like, Quick Ben's like, we got shit going on here right now. Like, I don't have time to talk. But they send the caravan, and the caravan, the Traders Guild. Or whatever,
Guild,
And at the time, you're like, who are these people? They just come out of a warren. And they're just there to help and like give like
so much more sense after reading this book.
And it makes a lot more sense later on when you read Memories of Ice.
Yeah, because a lot of people actually say that that's just super convenient, huge plot convenience in Deadhouse Gates. So all these people come in with all this help, and everyone usually in those live chat. I think we brought it up in our live chat, and the comments were like, "Oh, just wait till Memories of Ice, it gets explained." And yeah, I think that it definitely gets explained, and I think it helps quite a bit. But I really enjoyed that the parallel of the two stories kind of running at the same time, and the little connections that you see throughout it. It make a reread really, really cool, I think.
Oh, talking about this book with y'all with like everything I know is insane.
I can't even imagine.
It's the craziest shit.
Yeah.
There's another Deadhouse Gates thing that ties in here. Did you guys realize who the Knight of Death is that's talking to Call?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
He serves Hood. So there's a Knight of Death that works for Hood.
Okay.
It's Bodden.
Oh, I think I remember seeing this after and it making sense, but I didn't catch it the first time.
Yes, he is working for Hood now as the Knight of Death.
Jeez.
So very interesting.
And Bodden was the one who escaped with Fellison, right? And then gets kind of like cast out.
And Bodden has that moment where he like kind of redeems himself by letting them get away. Yeah.
That makes sense. And then we also get the tie-in at the very end with
Duiker?
Duiker. God.
Yeah.
Oh, Duiker being alive is like,
wasn't that awesome? I was literally like, I was like, no way. I started shouting.
I screamed.
Like, let me tell you a story. I was like, hell yes.
The chain of dogs. And you're like, fuck.
It's awesome, but I want to know. I'm looking forward to figuring out how and why. Because Duiker was my favorite character in Deadhouse Gates, and his ending, like, actually, that was the hardest hitting death.
I
for
agree.
Me so far. So I want to know what I'm like. Keep a tab on that. Let's see. I want to know. It was great to see him back and have that connection at the end, but I'm excited to see what the hell he's doing there and like what actually happened.
Yeah. Okay, so with that said, let's move on to Coral. What I'm gonna call it because it's spelled that way. Siege of Coral, because once we thought one siege was not enough, let's have another battle in part 4, and which ends up being even more epic in some ways. I mean, this was just like 150 pages of. This was like a more mega magic battle, I would say, than the Capistan one. That was more just sheer violence, and this is just like more magic explosion, boom boom stuff. But this is where we get a lot of big moments and a lot of characters start coming to a head. And we the first thing I want to talk about is, we saw Silver Fox talking to the Talon Eye, who are like, please, let us free or let us go and all this stuff. And she's like, no, I can't. I need you. And basically rejects their proposal. And you're just like yelling at her. You're like extremely frustrated with this moment, like in probably every way, shape, and form. And then at the same time, a little bit down the road, you start seeing Ickovian and you're like, oh, this character is going to do it. And that whole sequence, which is probably many people's, maybe not their favorite scene, but probably a scene that most people remember from this book, is the setting free of all these undead warriors who have been kind of just suffering in this state of, I don't know, it's like not truly death. It's just a state of presence where they're not alive and they're not dead, and they're just kind of existing as basically dead, but still
like undead,
lingering.
kind of.
Yeah. And you see Ickovian standing there being like, it doesn't matter what we need. It's not about, compassion, like what everyone always talks about with this series. So I think we should briefly talk about this, because I think compassion is one of those things that everyone talks about with this series. Before I even got into the series, everyone always talk about it like in a joking way, but also in a serious way. I feel like people, this is a good thing that a lot of people make fun of, I would say, not in a bad way, but just like, it's an easy thing for people to make fun of the series for, like, oh, compassion, Malazan and stuff. But it is everywhere in this book, and no more so than this whole scene and the speech given by Ickovian about humans not understanding compassion.
I am not yet done. Like, go, dude.
Just like absolutely epic in every way. And like, I think earlier I pointed out, like, okay, there are a bunch of characters who are kind of surpassing their role and what they probably have ever envisioned for themselves, and kind of are becoming living legends because of certain actions that they're doing. And Ickovian's one who is now kind of becoming a legend for sure in his own way, and doing what everyone else wouldn't do, despite the fact that this is what needed to be happen. It was the right thing to do. So what did you guys think about this? Because I think it's a pretty major scene and part of this book.
I've already heaped my praises on Ickovian, and this kind of just like tied the bow on it for me. I was like screaming at my book at this is like about the point where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be reading until the book's over now, because that whole scene was just like so impactful. And like, I've always had this like obsession in books with like the super powerful like being in a story, which is probably why I love Animander Rake so much. But seeing Ickovian, he was very much like not like Rake. Like, he's very like humble, but then seeing him just like possessing all of the sadness and still like carrying on, and then doing it again, and then doing it again, it was just like mind blowing. And it was so like sad and cool, and it was one of my favorite scenes in the book.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing where I feel like people are going to be throwing tomatoes at me virtually, but I don't know why this scene didn't land with me as heavily as almost everybody else seems to feel. Like, I thought it was good. I was like, oh, wow, like, great. Like, Ickovian did that. And then I felt a little bit more of an emotional punch with the and of the Jaghut and the child, or I think it's like a niece or something like that. That gave me more of an emotional punch. And honestly, watching a lot of the talks about Eckovian afterward, and I see more of it, and I hear you all talk about it, and I'm like, there's something maybe I was having a bad day. I don't know. I miss that punch. And so I see it now, but I'm jealous that I didn't get the punch of it when I read it, because I thought it's the kind of thing where everyone's giving a series or a book 5 stars, and you read it and it's like 4 stars, and then it makes it feel like a 3-star because like you don't see that. That's how I felt about it, and I kind of want to like go back and just reread like everything, like the chapter that's in, and see what I missed. Because I liked it, but I didn't love it, or I didn't have me screaming at the book or like.
That's valid.
I think that's okay. I think it's okay.
Oh,
I think we all take different things. Yeah, you
actually kick him out of the call.
You should stop reading.
You might as well just DNF'd it.
Yeah,
jeez.
I was DNF'd it 40 pages from the end.
Sounds like me and Lycanius.
I like Joanna says, I'll be honest, part of me didn't want Ickovian to be so compassionate. Then I felt bad after he did it. So moving. I feel like Erickson did this very purposely. I feel like a lot of people probably didn't want him to do, like we're kind of in line with the general consensus of many characters in this book with being like, there's more important things right now. There's like all these threats. There's all this stuff. We need you. Like we need these people here to help protect us. And Ickovian's just like, nah, dude, like we got to let them. We got to set them free.
They owe you literally nothing.
They are not tied to you. They shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And that confrontation with that kind of uncomfortable reality is kind of the major reason why I love this scene so much. And then obviously the quote, which everyone keeps commenting, I'll just pull it up, but we humans do not understand compassion. In each moment of our lives, we betray it. We know of its worth, yet in knowing we then attach it to a value. We guard the giving of it, believing it must be earned. Talani Mas, compassion is priceless in the truest sense of the word. It must be given freely in abundance. Thanks, Chris, for pulling that up. I was going to pull it up here, but
beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that is so good.
This is.
I got chills.
Did I miss that? I don't remember that.
Well,
sounds great.
So Pat, there's a scene that hit me harder, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the thing about this quote is, you're right. People meme on Malazan and compassion, but if you take a second and come down to the level and engage with the work, I genuinely believe that Malazan has the opportunity to change the way you view the world. I really do. And this quote, I have never forgotten it. I have never, ever forgotten it. And it is one of the quotes that is like it's not just a fancy thing to stick on a journal. Like it has application in life. And to only extend yourself in compassion and empathy to people who deserve it is cowardly. It is nothing. It is a meaningless gesture other than just being kind to someone who expects you to be kind. It's garbage. The real empathy and compassion comes when it is in abundance and it is free and you're giving it to someone who does not deserve it. And this quote absolutely impacted my life. And fractured relationships in my family, I think about this quote all the time. People that don't deserve the second of my time, who weren't there for me, but I decided to be there for them because that is what compassion is. And I think that is like, you know, Philip said, who should read Malazan? People who love fine literature, people who want to see more of themselves. And this is the exact quote. Like, I feel very, very, very strongly about this. Like, I think that it is like everything in the series. And this is shown time and time again throughout it. And that's why, you know, it's extremely easy to make fun of Malazan. It is funny, but it truly is applicable to the series. And I think you can take a lesson from it from life. So when people tell me that fantasy or fiction even doesn't have any real purpose, you know, I would point them to this and say that they are very wrong. And sometimes it takes a quote outside of the context of the life that we live in, the war of people that were always seem to be involved in one side or the other. And it takes like that different lens. And that's what this provides. Sorry, that was long.
No, that was awesome.
Snaps.
Very well put.
Snaps.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think it's, you know, family relationships, friend relationships, people at work. It doesn't really matter. I feel like there are plenty of instances where it's very easy to not feel like you owe anyone anything because they don't deserve, or you feel like this person doesn't deserve your compassion because they weren't there for you. They didn't do X thing for you. And, he's there. Here's this, like, it's not about that. Compassion is free and must be given. So, be the bigger person, like in and of itself is kind of the whole thing here. And it's not about you. It's all about what you can give to the world and what you should be giving to the world, no matter what is given back to you and why. So, I love that, Jimmy. So thanks for
the Ted Lasso
sharing that.
approach.
Dude, Ted Lasso.
Exactly.
I'm watching it right now. That's
Maybe
why it's
we'll
on
be a
my mind.
Ted Lasso is a Covian? Okay.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
I'm down. I'm down.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
the other
if
thing.
I tell my
Covian's
husband that Malazan is like Ted Lasso, he'll read it.
You should. It's essentially inspiration based on.
He doesn't read at
Malazan
all,
Book
and
of
we'll have
Readalong.
Malazan be his first series.
Yeah, Covian's on 50 odd pages of the book. He's like, he's not really in this book that much outside of being talked about. And I would say, I mean, this is a quote that I heard bits and pieces of before I read the series. So I would say it's definitely one of the most quoted people in the series, at least.
You know what's trippy, dude, is speaking of quotes in the series, you know Michael Burry, I'm sure you do, Alex, the guy who called The Big Short.
Oh yeah.
He like randomly quoted Whiskey Jack one day on Twitter, and it had like 100,000 favorites, and people were like, "What is this from?" It's from Memories of Ice. Like,
What the
how
hell?
wild
What?
is that? Yeah, Michael Burry loves Malazan. Is that crazy?
Oh my gosh. I can just see him like
The market's coming down, man.
Yeah.
I am not yet done.
tweeting about the market, flashing metal.
Steve
Christian Bale.
Carell.
Oh, okay. Oh, I
is
can
it-
totally see that guy liking Malazan.
Wait, am I wrong?
Michael Burry. Michael Burry is Christian Bale.
Yeah.
The one he has.
Is
He's
he?
the one who risks. Yeah, he risks like
The Big Short?
yeah, he risks all of his company's money. Wait, I'm gonna look this up. Am I thinking of the right person?
I think I'm right. I
Yeah.
think it's Steve Carell. I thought. No, you're right. You're right. I'm wrong. I'm sorry.
He's the one that risks, like, he just leverages all of this money that he shouldn't, and no one believes him. And he's the one that like waits the longest. He's kind of like
That's
the first.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to get off topic. An awesome movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend.
Why did I think
Yeah, I like that
was
movie.
Steve Carell? Man, that was a Mandela effect or something.
Yeah, no, it's the guy who like has a third eye for the markets.
Yeah, I know who. I thought it was played by Steve Carell, not Christian Bale, which is a wild mix-up. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
That guy I totally see him being like a Malazan fan. So makes sense.
Well, he
Right,
is.
yeah.
Based on his character because he's sort of he just seems like you. I don't know. It just seems like he.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It makes sense.
Yeah. He's like
He's kind of different, and I don't
Playing
think a lot
drum
of the
and-
guys on Wall Street are reading Malazan, but that guy would be.
yeah, I agree. That's awesome though. That's
Random fact. Yeah.
yeah. All right. So in addition to that, we also get the betrayal that at first seems insanely shocking. It probably was the scene that got me to like yell at the book. But after sitting with it, I'm like, I should have seen this coming. Was Whiskey Jack's death and Calor killing Whiskey Jack, and then realizing just like the actual what was going on all along with Calor and Night Chill and Silver Fox and Whiskey Jack being in the middle of it. So what did you guys think about Whiskey Jack's death? Because I would say I liked Whiskey Jack a lot from the beginning, but like with a lot of characters in the series, he's not. I don't know. The way I'm invested in the characters in Malazan Book of the Fallen is very different than how I'm invested in a character in like Realm of the Elderlings or something. Like, I feel very invested in them, but it's in a very different. I don't know. It just feels very different than like.
I totally get what you're. Yeah.
Like the character work is very different, so the result is different. But the death of Whiskey Jack just like hit me very hard, and it felt like it came out of nowhere. And I was shocked, and I was very mad at Calor, and I was just like, I hated that guy. I still hate
It
him.
definitely pissed me off. I don't know if I was shocked in the sense that I knew Calor was up to something, so I was like,
Yeah,
This is gonna
I
be-
could pick up he was not gonna
Yeah.
do something good.
yeah. It made me mad just because Whiskey Jack is like a really great character, and I think
Yeah.
that Corlot's reaction really cemented it as like the emotional boost that you look
Yes.
for in a death. Like
Yeah.
Whiskey Jack stepped on its own. I was like, okay, like the general falls. You see it sometimes, but I think cementing everything with Corlat from the start when we mentioned it's kind of an insta love, finishing off their romance with her reaction to it just cemented all of it, and it cemented him as a character too, into making him feel special. And his death kind of adding there's some hurt added seeing her reaction. Then if she wasn't there and he died, it probably wouldn't have punched me as much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all the references to his leg.
I was picking up on it, but I didn't think it would be the death of it. I was just like, something's
He's gonna lose his leg.
Yeah, go to the doctor, guys.
Yeah. Everyone go to the doctor.
We're putting it off.
His leg like collapses on him, right? When he slips or something.
Yeah.
Sword to sword with Calor. Yeah, that was tough because it's brought up at least like 7 or 8 times about his leg.
Yeah. It's just crazy because he's like one of the characters that's been there since the literal beginning of the series for the main 10 books, since the prologue of Gardens of the Moon. And so just like, holy shit, I thought he'd be around longer, but he's not. And so
definitely saw him being around longer.
I mean, if you think about like what led up to this, whenever Whiskey Jack has to put down Children of the Dead Seed or Mothers of the Dead Seed, I think, and Rake wants to do it for him with Dragnapur.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And knowing what Dragnapur is, which we get a whole lot of, we get the conversation of Manos inside of the sword with Draconis. I mean, that was the moment I fell in love with Malazan, like totally. Like I was, God, that conversation was so good. But the compassion that Rake shows Whiskey Jack, that, and Pat, I said there was something that got me more Nicovian. It was that. I was moved to tears by that. I don't know what it was. It sounds so silly whenever you say it out loud, but whew, that got me, man. It really did.
Yeah, their friendship, it's kind of slipped out of my head since finishing. It's not something I've been thinking about, but even just reflecting on it now, Whiskey Jack and what's his name, Rake, they have just such a good kind of out of nowhere friendship, insta friends, I guess you would say. And that was really good, Jimmy.
Well, and wasn't there a scene also with Rake like explaining what he likes about Whiskey Jack? Am I misremembering that? I feel like there was a scene where he was telling somebody like what he likes about Whiskey Jack, and I was like, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and to be clear, I had it was a little muddy, but in my notes I have it. It's a scene where Rake is executing the women of the Dead Seed with Dragnapur. Whiskey Jack stops him and does it himself, seemingly as a mercy to the women. And I said, it's possibly the best character scene I've ever seen, is what I have in my notes. I said the subtle lines of dialogue that take new meaning, and the depth of it now adds to not only Whiskey Jack, but Rake as characters and the relationship that they built in just one book. Whiskey Jack realizes the mercy Rake mentioned was not for the women, but for Whiskey Jack himself, not to bear the burden and do the executions in front of his soldiers. Gorgeous storytelling. And then also we get a little tidbit, but in this now we know that Whiskey Jack was the true leader and the biggest threat to Lysine. And Darujhistan was not about killing the bridge burners. It was about killing Whiskey Jack.
Yeah. Oh, that whole sequence just so good.
I'm glad I took those notes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks for your notes.
Shifts perspective.
I should upload my notes somewhere. I mean, there's probably 20 word pages here. Like, I should really upload these somewhere.
That's awesome that you had them after. I mean, you saved them for something like this.
I saved everything. I saved
reacquainted with the story.
Yeah, I mean, the notes for later in the series when it just becomes so much. I broke Google Keep Notes. Like I had to start a new one. That's how much I took. Like you can't do that. Like, okay. But yeah, that scene was the most emotional scene for me, and in Malazan probably still in the top 5.
We got Kevin as feels here. He's enjoying the read along.
New Discord.
He just finished, didn't he?
There you go, Jimmy. If new Discord perk. Someone
there it is. I mean, I started reading the prologues. I was really wanting to reread with you guys, but it's a slippery slope. Once you start, there's nothing like this. There's just nothing like it.
It's so hard for me to go. Like it takes a book after each Malazan book to then be like in the mood to read other stuff.
Yeah,
I was
once I finish one, I just like want to read the next one.
I did a live with Kyle last night where I talked about how going from a book, normally it's prose for me, but like what I'm reading around certain books can totally influence the other books. And Malazan so far
Yep.
has been that way, where because Erickson's prose is just like so superior to so much other prose, I normally have to pick up something that's like a completely different genre in order to like fully like it. Because if I picked up another epic fantasy after a Malazan book, I wouldn't like it as much if I picked it up at another time.
Yeah, I found that with a lot of series, I kind of have an issue with reading where I'll always want the shiny new thing where I'm like, I want to start that next book. Or if I'm like 3 or 4 books into a series, it starts to lose its, like, I like it and I'll enjoy it once I start it, but it loses its luster in terms of, I'll push that to next month and start this other thing. I'm not having that with Malazan. I've been on this every other month kind of schedule with this read along. And actually with Memories of Ice, I did that in April. I gave myself May, and now, I'm not starting House of Change till July, so that's a 2-month gap. But I'm like just so excited. Like I'm actually glad that I'm going to be forced. I don't think I'd even need to be forced to stick to it at this point, but I'm glad knowing as part of the read along that it's going to be about every other month. It just feels right. It's not. I can only be away from it for so long because it's kind of in my head a lot.
Yeah, today I was just like,
I can relate
oh my
to
God.
that.
Yeah, I'm gonna start House of Chains. I was like, this freaking
This
chat.
this conversation is making me want
to start House of Chains.
Yeah,
I mean, I read Malazan, I think all of it in like 8 months, but it wasn't because I was in a rush. I couldn't stop. Like I physically couldn't stop reading these books, and I did not care about anything else. Like I was like, I read The Unhuman Throne after Emperor's Blades, like right after Malazan. That poor book. Poor book. I crapped all over it. Like, this is garbage. What is this schlock genre? Pandering bullshit. I don't know. I never Pat, kind of what you said. You're always looking for the next thing. Like, oh, that's gonna be sick. I did not think about that at all when I was with Malazan.
Yeah, but Malazan is the next thing for me, which within the series, the next book. And Jimmy, I remember when you first started Malazan, because I was in the Discord at the time. I feel like I remember you saying like you picked up Gardens of the Moon on a whim, and I think you were like, I'm going to read a chapter a day or something like that, which you often say for half the books you read. And then I just felt like a couple months passed, and you were like halfway through, and then you finished, and you had good things to say about it. And I feel like when this series captures you, it's sort of like people either don't stick around or they're in hard.
Yeah, it does.
And I feel blessed that I actually liked it because I was so certain I wasn't going to enjoy it because everyone says it's so confusing and it's hard to understand and too philosophical or complex, and those things usually do not work for me at all. Like it was the epitome of not going to work for me, but it just does. It's that good.
Yeah, that's my hot take about Malazan is that I loved every book. Like there's a lot of people like, Alan's a huge fan of the series, read it probably more than anybody else in our little sphere. And he has ones that he loves and ones that he hates.
So much.
But that's pretty common. Like there's a lot of people like, oh, like Dust of Dreams gets a lot of flack. I love Dust of Dreams. I think it has the most epic stuff in the entire series. And that's my hot take. I loved every book. I genuinely did not at any point feel like, like I loved it.
Yeah. And even if you dislike one, it's like, then you go and read something else and you're still just looking back like, wow, this is nothing like, if there's like another epic fantasy book, you're just like, this doesn't even feel, this feels like minuscule on a scale.
And it has the fireworks. It has lasers and fireballs and dinosaurs. Like that's the other thing. It's like, it's creative. It's not just, well written. It has everything.
Wow. Chris is out here picking favorites in the chat.
All right.
Wow. That's fired.
I agree. My opinions are correct.
Everyone should go check out Pat's channel. Pat is very bright. He's also very tall. Not as tall as Tall Guy Reads, but very tall.
I should have just I'm definitely not as tall as Tall Guy Reads. I should just change my name to Small Guy Reads.
Pat showed to the Panion Seer at the end how he now helps healing burn. Yeah, what do you guys think about the Panion Seer the whole time? But he was like this evil force, and at the very end, it turns out he's not. I mean, he's just guys who've been tortured just as much as.
I think this was
more than anyone could ever punish.
This was the emotional punch for me, and I'm having trouble, even though I'm hyping it up. I'm having trouble remembering he's a Jaghood, right? Being controlled through a Kachin Shamal by the crippled god. Is that right? There's like some sort of channeling. It's
What
hard to
is
remember,
this series?
but I do
What
remember.
is-
Here is the Jagdhut boy from the prologue, is what I'm pretty certain of.
Right.
But
And I know that his niece or whatever is what is Shut the Rent, or and that's done by Tool's sister. And the way that she's able to save her. And again, there is compassion shown to him there, despite everything that just happened with the Tennis-Gowrie and all the trickle down of the chaos that ensued from it and his domain, as you want to call it. And then, them coming and they cool off, literally cool off Burn, right? They bring the temperature down in Burn's situation, which that was Burn's whole thing in this book, this like idea of just being in the ground. And I think it's Quick Ben who ends up with her early on, and you see that something's brewing and it could destroy the world. I loved all of that. And it's kind of hard. Another one of those things where he goes for it in the sense that it's not really easy to visualize. It's like, oh, there's a sleeping being. And if she wakes, and then there's the whole thing with the hammer that can either wake her, which would destroy the world, I believe, because she's been tainted. Or I don't remember the alternative. If he doesn't swing it, obviously the crippled god could take over. All of it, that was outside of Capistan, my favorite like subplot, I guess you would say, or honestly the most main plot. You call the Domin the main plot.
Yeah,
that's right. His sister. I don't know why I thought niece. Yeah, his sister. I think it's because she's still a child and he's grown. So I think somebody maybe refers to him as her uncle or something.
Now
I think you're right. That rings a bell.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember every detail, and it
is even. I'm
It's
talking
impossible.
about how much I love it, and I can't even remember all the details. It's
I literally read it a month
I don't
ago.
think I
A month
even
and a
put
half
this
ago.
together when I read it. So I think
Well,
I'm learning this right now.
That's what I said. I read the prologue right after finishing the book, and it wasn't until then when like some of this stuff actually clicked. And then I was just like, wow, I could reread this whole book right now, and I feel like this would just be
it'd be awesome.
Read it back to back. Yeah.
I just remember the Jagdhut boy being from the prologue, and I also remember that Tok died, kind of, but it was carrying the soul of Tog, and then he's in Annister's body. Like, I just remember being really freaked out by Tok's entire arc in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember how he ends up in Annister's, and he was the king of the Children of the Dead Sea, right? Or the king of the Tennis-Gowrie. And I remember his eyes hanging out, right?
Yes.
That's like a thing about him. Yeah, I don't
Totally
know. I don't think I
thing.
connected the dots on how Tok went into him and kind of became him.
He was like the mortal sword of Tog. And then I don't know. I can't remember how he gets in Annister's body, but I just put that in my mind as like one of the weirder moments of the book for me. And Tok just in general is a weird, and I love Tok, by the way, like especially whenever we're first introduced to Tok, so good.
Yeah. I was talking for sure.
Okay, Kev, we're on the same page here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I felt the same. I actually feel like the last 100 pages of this book, there's so much just heavy stuff happening.
Yeah.
That
Speaking of Annister, talk about an underwhelming villain. I felt like he was like so lame once like we got to know him. I was like, this is the dude leading the Children of the Dead Seed. Like, I don't know. He felt very underwhelming to me.
I feel like that's how people felt about Napoleon whenever they met him. They're like,
yeah,
so
probably.
short.
Yeah, look at this little guy.
Small
guy reads.
Small guy leads.
Okay.
All right.
On that note.
Yeah. On that note, I guess, does anyone have any other thoughts on Memories of Ice? Or
I had one more.
Anything?
I wanted to. Joanna had commented a while ago asking about our thoughts on Moonspawn. It wasn't that far.
Yeah.
Moonspawn is like one of the coolest things to me. I don't know why. I think it's the image. That image that's like the complete works of Malazan or whatever, and it's Moonspawn. I think that image has stuck with me. But I was so stressed the whole time. Every time somebody was like, "Where's Moonspawn?" I was like, "If Rake is dead, I will also be dead." I was like, I can't go through that right now. But also just like, I feel like that added so much suspense because it was something that they were really depending on because the T-Standy are dope and so good.
Oh wow. That is this Pale?
Yeah, this is pale.
Yes,
Okay. That's awesome.
There's Moonspawn.
So good.
It's,
And then are those
again,
Batiste
imagination
AI,
runs
dragons
wild.
coming from it.
Oh, in not to mention Moonspawn, and I see Crow. I'm thinking Crone. What about Crone? Being
Oh,
tied
yeah.
to the protector of the crippled god's magic type deal, and like we realize that Crone isn't just a messenger. Crone's super powerful. Yeah, I forgot about the
And
Crone.
doesn't-
The great Raven.
Am I misremembering, or was there something where like her powers were getting taken or something?
I can't remember.
I might be misremembering. I feel
I'm
like
sure this is the book where I was like, oh shit, like Crone matters.
yeah, I feel like there was something that was like
not
blocking
just
her
a
or
bird.
something. I don't remember, but
I remember Crone is always playing multiple sides, right?
oh, always, yeah.
In the first book, it becomes clear, and then in the second, and then here, I don't remember a ton. To be honest, I'm blanking right now.
But yeah, super dope.
Yeah, I agree. Agree with everything.
That's all. That's all I wanted.
Well, final thought for me, I wanted to put a footnote on the Ecovian thing, and that while I didn't get the full emotional punch, and apparently I said that Ecovian sucks according to Kev, so a really
I heard
beautiful
it verbatim.
footnote on that actually maybe delivered a late punch of that emotion was the end, seeing Tool and his sister, basically freed and being able to go on their way. That kind of sealed it for me in a good way. I thought that was a really nice kind of, I don't want to say send off because I hope we see them again in some degree. But I did really enjoy that scene.
Yeah, I agree. Are you guys? Good question. How do you guys feel about returning to Seven Cities in House of Chains next? So the next, I believe, is kind of a sequel to Dead House Gates. I believe it picks up.
I didn't know that. So
from what I understand, it's not a direct. I think it's kind of the continuation of Dead House Gates.
Sure.
And then Midnight Tides is a prequel. I don't. Something.
I'm excited to figure out who the hell Karsa is, because that's like one of those characters that I think Karsa starts House of Chains. And also I think I heard somewhere that we get what is Fellison's sister's name, the one who's like the military leader. I heard that we get some Tavor. We get to meet her in House of Chains, possibly. So that I'm looking forward to. I'm just very excited for the book in general. Those are the two things I know about it.
Nice.
I am also very excited.
House of Chains is a little rough for some people because you actually are going to follow a single POV for a little bit. And I just embrace it. And House of Chains to this day is still one of my favorite endings in the series. I would say that this is one of the more polarizing entries, but I think it's phenomenal. And it's also one of the ones that improved the most when you're done with the series too, which is always cool.
Nice. Yeah.
I love a divisive book.
Me too.
I'm actually more excited for a divisive book than a book that's supposed to be the best, because there's no pressure. Either you're going to agree and maybe not like it, or maybe you love it and can be a hipster about it. So
you can come and be a House of Chains lover with me, because
and Joanna.
Yeah, I'm excited to meet Karsa. I feel like that's a character I've heard so much about, and I'm just like,
witness.
Who is this guy? Witness.
Yeah, there's an emoji in Discord that says witness, and I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah, I know.
I want to know what does that mean?
Compassionate witness. I was like, well, all I knew about Malazan for the longest time.
Kev also loved House of Chains. He wants us.
He really wanted everyone.
Oh man. My last thought, by the way, is that I'm glad that Tool got laid.
Yeah,
he deserved it. He deserved
it. Showed him a good time.
A lot.
Love to see
it. Was a very dusty affair, but
Speak of a character, I love Titan through the whole book. I was like, this bitch, she's the best.
Titan, Tool, talking Tool. I mean, good stuff.
A+.
I don't know if I look forward to the definitely the House of Chains, but I'm very excited for the Midnight Tides. I think this group here is ripe for a Midnight Tides, which is a prequel, but it works. It's amazing.
I'm very excited for a prequel.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Because we were just kind of like dropped into a scenario. So
everything.
Don't worry, you won't understand anything.
Okay, good.
All these ranks, you're gonna have to learn them again. So just
fair.
Just embrace all of it. It's fun.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Pumped.
Excited as I'll ever be. All right. So with that said, does anyone have any closing thoughts, or can I have everyone say like where everyone can find you? I think I'm going to link everyone's channels down in the description below once this is over. So if you're watching this and you want to find their channels, definitely do so. They all have fantastic content. So that'll be linked to the description below. I believe everyone else here, anywhere else you want people to be able to find you, like Twitter, Instagram, you guys.
I'm not anywhere else but
Doesn't really
Jimmy's
matter.
Discord or the Grimoire. Really, I don't have any socials for my channel yet.
Well, good reason to join both of those. Because we can just keep discussing this series as we make our way through House of Chains.
Fun fact: the Steven Erickson channel in my Discord is a dating channel.
Yes.
I don't know how that happened, but it did. It has
Wait,
been
what?
for a while.
Wait, what?
Yeah, people used to like accidentally put their dating advice in my Steven Erickson channel, and then it just became a meme. It hasn't happened in a long time, but like there was like a solid 9 months where it was not really talking about Malazan, but people talking about their love life. It's very interesting.
It's all about compassion. That's what we're talking about.
So yeah,
It's a new dating reality show. Steven Erickson.
how can I be more like Tool? That's the question.
All right. So with that said, I'm going to log up for the night, but everyone, thanks for joining. This was awesome. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Thanks to all of you guys, Jimmy, Pat, and Jordan. This was a lot of fun, and I'm excited for House of Chains.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Alex.
everybody.